4:15 in the afternoon on March 18, 1943, the convoy known as HX-229 moved slowly eastward through the cold water south of Greenland. 40 merchant ships stretched across the gray Atlantic in 8 columns. Their cargo mattered more than their number. Inside the steel hulls were 600,000 barrels of aviation fuel, thousands of tons of ammunition, aircraft parts, trucks, field radios, and crates of 30 caliber and 50 caliber machine gun ammunition destined for Allied armies in Europe and North Africa. Every crate represented combat power. Every ship represented weeks of production in American and Canadian factories. And every mile of ocean between Halifax and Britain was hunted territory. The convoy sailed under the protection of Escort Group B7, commanded by Commander Peter Gretton of the Royal Navy. The escort screen formed a moving shield around the slow merchant ships. 2 destroyers, 6 corvettes, 1 armed trawler. Each vessel carried Type 2 7-1 radar, ASDIC sonar, and racks of Mark 7 depth charges, each charge holding nearly 300 pounds of Torpex explosive. But even with escorts, the convoy remained vulnerable. The merchant ships could only move at 8 knots. German submarines could sprint faster underwater for short bursts. The real danger was not a single submarine. The real danger was coordination. Since 1941, the German Navy under Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz had used a system called the Rudel tactic, known to Allied sailors as the Wolf Pack. A single submarine would detect a convoy and transmit contact reports by radio. Other submarines would converge, sometimes more than a dozen. They would attack at night on the surface, where their low silhouette made them difficult to detect. By March 1943, the German Navy had nearly 120 operational U-boats in the Atlantic. Many belonged to the Type 7C class, the backbone of the German submarine fleet. Each boat carried 5 torpedo tubes and up to 14 torpedoes, usually the G7E electric torpedo or the faster G7A steam-powered torpedo. Both carried warheads weighing roughly 600 pounds, enough to break the keel of a cargo ship in seconds. At 5:03 in the afternoon, more than 200 miles west of HX-229, the submarine U-591, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Hans-Jürgen Zetsche, surfaced briefly between swells. The periscope rose through the water. Through gray mist, Zetsche saw smoke. Not one plume. Dozens. Convoy sighted. He immediately transmitted a contact signal to German Naval Command. The signal traveled to headquarters of BDU, Befehlshaber der Unterseeboote, located in occupied France. Within minutes, Dönitz ordered several submarines already patrolling the North Atlantic to intercept. Among them were U-91, U-600, U-630, and U-338. They began moving toward the convoy. By 8:40 that evening, HX-229 sailed deeper into the patrol line. The escorts attempted to maintain formation despite heavy seas. Corvette HMS Snowflake, part of the escort screen, detected a faint sonar echo. Distance, 1,200 yards. The signal faded. Possibly a submarine, possibly a whale. Commander Gretton ordered the escorts to maintain defensive positions. He could not chase every uncertain sonar return. If the escort scattered, the convoy would open gaps. Gaps meant opportunity, and the German submarines were patient. Far beneath the waves, U-91 adjusted course. Commander Oberleutnant zur See Heinz Walkerling studied the convoy contact reports transmitted across the Atlantic. Multiple submarines were closing in. If the pack formed correctly, they could strike simultaneously during the night. Night attacks mattered for a simple reason. Most merchant ships carried no radar. Even many escorts had difficulty spotting a surfaced submarine in darkness and heavy seas. At 10:12 that night, the first German submarine reached visual range. Through binoculars, the commander could see the silhouette of cargo ships against the dim horizon. A convoy had been found, but HX-229 was not alone in the Atlantic. Only 60 miles away sailed convoy SC-122, another group of 40 merchant ships heading toward Britain. 2 convoys, nearly 90 cargo vessels. To German command, this looked like the perfect hunting ground. To the Allied escorts, it meant something far worse. The Wolf Pack was about to form, and by midnight, more submarines were approaching from every direction. The ocean around the convoys was beginning to close. At 12:47 in the morning on March 19, 1943, the first torpedo ran. The launch came from U-91, which had crept to within 1,000 yards of the outer column of convoy HX-229. Commander Oberleutnant zur See Heinz Walkerling fired a spread of 3 G7E electric torpedoes from the forward tubes. Electric torpedoes moved slower than steam models, about 30 knots, but they left no visible wake. In night conditions that mattered, 3 white shapes slid beneath the surface toward the merchant columns. 2 missed. The third struck the British cargo ship Tukarinka, a tanker carrying aviation fuel. The explosion split the hull near the engine room. Within 3 minutes, the tanker was burning heavily and drifting out of formation. For the convoy escorts, the attack confirmed the worst possibility. Multiple submarines had reached the convoy perimeter. Commander Peter Gretton, aboard the destroyer HMS Duncan, ordered immediate counteraction. The destroyer turned hard to starboard and accelerated to 15 knots. Sonar operators activated ASDIC Type 128, scanning for submarine echoes beneath the waves. But the German tactic relied on surface attacks. Several submarines were not underwater. They were moving between the merchant ships in darkness. At 1:20 in the morning, another torpedo attack came from U-600, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Horst Wilner. 2 torpedoes struck the cargo ship Neriva. A third hit the British freighter British Fortitude. Within minutes, both ships slowed and began taking on water. Across the convoy lanes, signal lamps flashed. Escort vessels attempted to reposition, but the situation was becoming complicated. At the same time, the HX-229 convoy was under attack. The nearby convoy SC-122 had also been discovered. German command now directed more than 15 submarines toward the combined convoy routes. This moment represented the core danger of the Battle of the Atlantic. If enough submarines gathered around slow-moving cargo ships, escorts could become overwhelmed. The result would not only be ship losses. The result would be supply collapse. Britain depended on imported fuel, grain, and military equipment. In 1943, the island still required millions of tons of cargo every month. Without successful convoys, British factories would slow, aircraft production would drop, armies preparing for future operations in Europe would face shortages of ammunition, vehicles, and aviation fuel. That strategic reality meant that every escort commander in the North Atlantic carried enormous responsibility. The defense of HX-229 now depended on new technology. At 2:05 in the morning, the destroyer HMS Vedette detected a radar contact at 3,000 yards using Type 271 surface search radar. The radar screen showed a small return moving across the convoy track, likely a surfaced submarine. Commander Gretton ordered an intercept. Vedette increased speed and closed the distance. The radar operator maintained the contact as the destroyer approached. At 2,000 yards, the submarine crew realized they had been detected. The German boat began an emergency dive, but radar had already provided precise bearing. Vedette passed directly over the dive location and released a pattern of 10 Mark 7 depth charges. The explosions shook the water. Seconds later, air bubbles and oil rose to the surface. The submarine had been damaged. Meanwhile, another technological shift was entering the battle. To the west of the convoys, the escort carrier USS Bogue, part of a hunter-killer group of the United States Navy, was launching aircraft. The carrier operated Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers and Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighters, both equipped with airborne radar sets capable of detecting surface submarines at night. Aircraft changed the entire strategic equation. A submarine on the surface could travel fast and recharge batteries, but radar-equipped aircraft could detect it from miles away. This forced German crews to dive more often. Diving reduced speed. Reduced speed meant fewer successful attacks. At 3:18 in the morning, an Avenger aircraft from USS Bogue detected a radar return. Distance, 7 miles. The pilot descended toward the contact. The radar operator confirmed the target. A surfaced submarine? The Avenger approached silently over the dark Atlantic. Then the pilot switched on the landing light. For the submarine crew below, the sudden beam of light revealed a new danger. Aircraft now hunted them in the same darkness that once protected them. The Avenger dropped 4 depth charges set for shallow detonation. Columns of water erupted around the submarine as it attempted to crash dive. By dawn, the Atlantic around the convoys had become a battlefield of technology. Radar screens, sonar pings, radio intercepts, aircraft patrol patterns. The German wolf pack had found the convoys, but the convoys were no longer defenseless targets. And as the morning of March 19, 1943 approached, the number of submarines in the area was still increasing. More were closing in from the east, more from the south. The largest convoy battle of the year was forming, and the next attacks would determine whether the Atlantic supply line survived. At 7:10 in the morning on March 19, 1943, the sea around convoys HX-229 and SC-122 revealed the scale of the battle. Smoke from damaged freighters drifted across the gray horizon. Oil slicks spread across the surface. Escort ships moved constantly between the merchant columns, responding to sonar contacts and distress signals. During the night, the German wolf pack had launched repeated attacks. Several cargo ships had been hit, but something important had changed. The escorts were now striking back with increasing precision. At 8:02 in the morning, the British destroyer HMS Harvester, commanded by Commander A. Tate, detected a strong sonar contact using ASDIC Type 128. The contact appeared at 1,500 yards, moving slowly beneath the convoy lanes. The sonar operator tracked the echo carefully, course steady, depth increasing. Commander Tate ordered an attack run. Harvester accelerated to 17 knots and crossed directly over the contact. The destroyer released a pattern of 12 Mark 7 depth charges, each set to detonate at different depths between 100 and 300 feet. The explosions shook the destroyer hull. Seconds later, a plume of oil surfaced. The submarine below had been heavily damaged, but the battle was still far from over. German submarines continued to close on the convoys throughout the day. By midday, more than 20 U-boats were operating in the surrounding Atlantic patrol zone. Their commanders attempted to reorganize the wolf pack. The plan remained the same: surface at night, attack in groups, overwhelm the escorts. But by March 1943, the balance of technology had shifted. The Allied escort groups now used high-frequency direction finding, often called Huff-Duff. This system allowed radio operators to determine the direction of German submarine transmissions. Each time a U-boat reported convoy positions to headquarters, the escorts could estimate the submarine location. At 1:25 in the afternoon, a Huff-Duff station aboard HMS Duncan intercepted a short German signal transmission. Within seconds, the operator calculated a bearing. Commander Gretton ordered a corvette to investigate. The corvette, HMS Pink, altered course and activated sonar. At 2,000 yards, the sonar operator detected a submerged contact. Pink immediately began a depth charge attack. The corvette released 8 depth charges in a rolling pattern, forcing the submarine deeper and disrupting its approach to the convoy lanes. Each disrupted submarine mattered. German Wolfpack tactics required coordination. If submarines were pushed away from the convoy perimeter, the pack could not concentrate its attacks. Meanwhile, aircraft from USS Bogue continued patrols throughout the afternoon. One Avenger crew detected a surfaced submarine attempting to recharge batteries. The aircraft descended and fired 50 caliber machine guns to suppress the submarine crew while preparing a depth charge attack. The submarine attempted an emergency dive. The Avenger dropped 4 depth charges, detonating near the diving hull. When the aircraft circled back, debris and oil marked the water. The submarine had likely been destroyed. Events like this represented a larger strategic change. Throughout 1942, German submarines had sunk Allied shipping faster than it could be replaced. But by early 1943, 3 key Allied advantages were emerging: radar-equipped aircraft, escort carriers operating in mid-ocean gaps, improved convoy escort coordination using sonar and radio direction finding. Each advantage reduced the effectiveness of Wolfpack tactics. The Battle of the Atlantic was not decided in a single day. It was decided through thousands of small engagements like the one unfolding around HX-229 and SC-122. Every submarine, forced to dive early, lost attack opportunity. Every aircraft patrol reduced the safe operating area for German boats. Every convoy that reached Britain delivered fuel, food, trucks, aircraft engines, and artillery shells needed for future Allied offensives. By the evening of March 20, 1943, the combined convoys began pulling away from the concentrated Wolfpack zone. German submarines continued to shadow them, but the attacks grew less frequent. The escorts had held the line. Several merchant ships had been lost, but the majority survived the crossing. The strategic result mattered far beyond this stretch of ocean. Each successful convoy strengthened the Allied supply network. Those supplies fueled aircraft factories in Britain. They equipped divisions preparing for the invasion of Europe. They supported operations across North Africa and the Mediterranean. At the same time, German submarine losses were rising. Each destroyed U-boat meant months of lost training, construction, and experienced crews. For Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the mathematics of the Atlantic War were beginning to change. The Wolfpacks could still attack, but the convoys were becoming harder to kill, and as 1943 continued, the Atlantic would slowly shift from a hunting ground for submarines into a battlefield dominated by radar, aircraft, and coordinated escort fleets. The convoy lanes had survived, and with them the supply lifeline that would eventually carry Allied armies back to the continent of Europe.